Hello and welcome to Letters Home, a story of a World War II B-17 pilot from Lowell, Michigan, in his own words. And he just so happens to be my grandpa. I'm your host, Annie Whitlock, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, my dad, Mitch McMahon, my aunt, Lori Summerfield, and Dale Croft from the Lowell Historical Museum.
In each episode of Letters Home, we're going to dive into letters written by my dad during his time in World War II that he sent to his parents, siblings, and friends back home in Lowell, Michigan. We'll be reading his own words and giving some context as to what was happening in the world and in Lowell at the time he wrote these.
In this episode, we read letters from Easter and Bruce's birthday. We learn Bruce's predictions for the end of the war and get our first mention of the Lena Lou.
We're going to find out what that is as we go. But we're going to start with Easter, 1943. And fun fact, in 1943, Easter was the latest it could be, April 25th. And the next time Easter will be this late is 2038, which isn't as far away as it seems.
Oh, my goodness.
And in the ledger, around this time, the ledger said something like, we'll all be dead by then or something from 1943. It was very morbid.
Well, it's very early this year. Does it get much earlier than your birthday?
I don't know. That's a good question.
March 31st?
Mitch and I
That's a
will
good
be
question.
86 if we make it then.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. I mean, I'll have like a senior in high school. Bruce wrote a short letter to his family on Easter in his own words.
Easter Sunday. Dear Mother and Dad, just came back from 8:30 Mass, and we had high Mass, and the church was packed. Even fellows kneeling in the aisles and outside on the steps. Seemed like about 90% of them went to communion also. I'm sending some things we received at the priest's Easter and the priest's Easter gift to us. The Mother's Day card was given to us last Tuesday, and you can be sure that I'll fulfill the spiritual bouquet, Mother. I haven't much time to write now as I fly at 1. I'll write back later tonight or tomorrow. Hope you had a nice Easter Sunday. Your loving son, J. Bruce.
So we have copies of the program from Mass and like prayer cards from that particular service and like the note from the priest. He mentioned all of this in that letter, so we have it in the primary source documents that Dale has put together on the Lowell Historical Museum website. So that's all there if you're interested. He did send them off, and they're there. Do you all have any memories of Easter growing up? Was it a big deal growing up?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Being Roman Catholic, sure. Holy Week was a big deal. Maundy Thursday, Good Friday.
Okay. Any special celebrations or anything?
Well, we went to church a lot. I mean, the Stations of the Cross.
That makes sense. Just a lot of church.
We were
Okay.
there all week. pretty much.
And I had a lot of fish sticks. I didn't like fish. So I had a lot of fish
Oh.
sticks that I remember. Yeah.
Like for Lent leading up
Yes.
to Easter?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tradition that didn't quite make it.
That's
Oh, no,
right.
it's
we don't really do anything for Easter. I don't anyway. So, oh well. But yeah, that makes sense. Like it's a big deal. So he sent home all the things and he wanted his parents to know that, he had been to church on Easter. So that's good.
It is a big deal to people who still are in a spiritual, Annie. I mean, Easter is like the biggest deal.
It is.
For
I suppose
people
that is
are
true.
Christians, yeah. Just
She's
FYI.
like, it's not such a big deal anymore.
No, I meant like to.
For you.
For you.
For
For
our
I didn't
you.
mean to knock Easter. I just meant like it's something that hasn't quite made it down to
To you.
my household.
There you go.
I guess is what I'm saying.
There you go.
Oh
Our
man,
audience was just cut in half.
we're gonna have to cut all this out. No, I'm just kidding. So, a couple days after Easter, on April 27th, Bruce writes to his family again to talk about the events of what happened on the night of Easter. So apparently, things got more interesting after church. So, in his own words.
Sunday night, we had an alert, and I was chosen as one of the pilots to fly a 17 out if we were called on. I sat in the ship with the crew and live bombs for 2 hours, and then the alert was called off. I understand that L.A. was blacked out. They sure are expecting an attack on this coast. Every day the papers have something to say along these lines. Personally, I believe that this coast will be attacked with bombs. It'll be more or less a nuisance raid, but in a way it'll be a great thing for the rest of the country. It certainly ought to bring home the fact that this is a war we're into a lot of people who think it's only a period of prosperity. The sooner everyone realizes that this is a tough war, the sooner it will be fought properly and be over with. I still have my hopes as it to being over in 44.
Yeah, so of course he's wrong, I believe, about the West Coast being bombed. And of course he's wrong about the war being over in 1944. But this is a really interesting take he has here about wanting the U.S. to get bombed in order to get a wake-up call for
Serious
everybody?
about it.
Yeah.
Serious about
So I don't know. What do you all think? That just seems like a hot take.
Seems like Pearl Harbor was a pretty big wake-up call. So,
Yeah.
but
This is
maybe bombing the mainland would be.
Yeah. And this is almost 2 years later. Maybe he thinks people have forgotten.
Yeah, maybe.
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, a year and a half later. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So, and of course, we'll talk here coming up in our next segment about about the Japanese were occupying a part of the U.S. territory. It just wasn't a state at the time. But so we'll segue right there into what's going on in the world and in Lowell in May 1943. So before we get into that, though, Bruce has moved on to Dalhart, Texas in May of 1943, and we'll have Dale tell us about Dalhart Army Air Base.
Well, in the wake of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the Dalhart Texan newspaper began asking its readers what they could do to support America's war effort. Three prominent men in Dalhart, Herman Steele, the manager of Dalhart Chamber of Commerce, along with the mayor Herbert Peoples and Elmer Elliott, manager of the DeSoto Hotel, announced plans to petition the Army Air Corps to build a training base near the town.
Oh.
Their effort became a reality when it was approved in April 1942 and activated in September 1942. The base was located 2 miles southwest of Dalhart, Texas, on a 3,000-acre field that had 3 paved runways that were 8,000 feet long. The base was originally used for glider training, where cadets honed their skills, takeoff, and tow flight on a 350-foot nylon rope behind a C-47 Skytrain tow plane. The cadets also were trained in infantry skills such as ground training and marksmanship on skeet shooting fields, as they were expected to serve as combat soldiers after landing. A diary entry from Verna Hancock wrote, "The Army base was like a small city. Among other things, there was a gym, weekly newspaper, hospital, bowling alley, barber beauty shop, PX, chapel, officers club, fire department, library armament, a band, baseball field, baseball and softball teams,
Wow.
a mess hall, weddings, and new babies born at Loretta Hospital in Dalhart. Soldiers could fish in local lakes without a license. The base was actually Dalhart's only gated community. The gates were locked and no civilians could get in unless they were civilian service workers or entertainers. In February 1943, Dalhart was transferred to the 2nd Air Force, which placed the base under the jurisdiction of the 2 Bomber Command. The new mission of this base was to be a B-17 Flying Fortress, a B-24 Liberator heavy bomber, and fighter plane aircrew replacement training facility. A diary from Verna Hancock wrote in April 1943, because Bruce talked about the wax and looking out the window. In April 1943, 150 members of the Women's Army Air Corps arrived to join the men at the base. I can only imagine the excitement on the men's part. There was some discussion on window coverings on the ladies' barracks.
Oh.
Of course, the windows couldn't be left uncovered. Finally, it was decided that blinds, not curtains, would be installed. The women's job nationwide, which we talked about last month, was nurses, office workers, radio operators, electricians, and air traffic controllers. The base closed in December 1945 and was given to the city of Dalhart. With the end of the war in September 1945, 2nd Air Force training ended and Dalhart became a storage depot for surplus aircraft.
Wow. I'm just amazed that
it was a big city.
In a year and a half, they went from, we have an idea, to a full-on Army base.
Yeah.
I mean,
That seems so fast.
Yeah.
With all those things that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, it was a city
They just made it happen.
with entertainment,
Such
hospitals.
a short amount of time. Wow. Yeah, I guess that's the war infrastructure for you.
And
War logistics.
There's some photos and stuff on our YouTube presentation. So
Okay.
I think the wax insisted on the curtains after they saw Dad standing there from last week.
That was yes. There you go. That was in Blythe,
towel.
but
Oh,
still,
okay. All right.
I'm sure he wasn't the only one. So now we're going to read Bruce's first letter from Dalhart when he gets to Dalhart, Texas, from May 13th, 1943, in his own words.
Thursday night. Dear Mother and Dad, At least I've located the telephones on the post. For long distance calls, there are two, one at the telegraph office and one at the group headquarters. I'll try either Tuesday or Wednesday to get you. The calls will be after 10 at night, so don't be expecting them. On second thought, I won't try Tuesday because you'll be out. We'll say Wednesday of next week. Everything is swell here. I like the field very much, and the organization is very good. As soon as I know the ropes, it will be heaven compared to Blythe. I'm not sure, but possibly I'll get a chance for a few days off in July and August. You're right, Dad. You're right, Dad, when you say the importance of your job decides about leaves. If I was a ground officer or even in a pursuit outfit, I'd have been home long ago. Now, with our country starting the offensive and stress being placed heavily on bombardment, any key man in the squadron is restricted to the post except for an occasional 24-hour pass. It's been over a month since I've been off a post, and it'll probably be another couple of weeks before I get off again. The clipping you sent was the first fatal accident they'd had on this post. It happened the night I got here, and the ship burned just a short distance from the field. In fact, about 20 yards south of the north-south runway. There's no definite cause for it. Looks like the pilot just made his turn into the field too low and flew into the ground. As we say, cars have accidents, but no one stops driving. So do planes, but no one stops flying. Today the weather is quite cool and the sun is shining, and it makes it a typical spring day. There's no mud now or sloppy weather to contend with here. I'm going to try to get off the post soon so that I can have a picture taken for you. As soon as I get this chance, I'll send you a picture in my new summer uniform. The uniform is suntan and is a really nice looking one. Don't have much to say now, so long until Sunday when I'll write again. All my love, your loving son, J. Bruce.
So I did a little digging because, of course, I had time at Girl Scouts while I was waiting for Mackenzie, my daughter, and I did found out where there was a deadly plane crash in Dalhart where 11 men were killed.
Oh, goodness.
And I'm pretty sure that's what Bruce was referring to. So obviously this news made it to Frank and Lotta. It must have made national news because they had sent him a clip about it. So I like how he's trying to kind of keep them calm. Like, planes crash.
That's
Cars
just the way it
crash.
is. Just the way that it is. Yep.
So I don't know, but but yeah, so it clearly must have made national news. Bruce did write another letter that Sunday, and he gives a lot of information about what is going on in the war, in his own words.
Sunday evening. Dear Mother and Dad, perhaps you've noticed that my letters are getting to be on the note size. Well, the reason is I'm being kept very busy. Fact is, when I finish up at night with my groundwork, it's sometimes less than 6 hours until I have to begin again at 7 in the morning. There's more work at this post, but conditions are so much better that I'm willing to do extra duty. Even the weather makes for more work because it isn't so darn hot. Before at Blythe, after a 4-hour mission and a couple of hours groundwork, you were all set to lie in your bunk and perspire. I tried to call at 10 tonight, 11 your time, and there was a 6-hour delay through Chicago. However, on Wednesday there won't be the delay that there is on Sunday. Sometimes this next week, I hope to be able to get into Amarillo for a few hours. I've put in for a pass and should be for 24 hours. If it is that long, I'll go into Amarillo and have my picture taken. Over at the squad room this afternoon, I was reading A2 reports, intelligence. From the looks of things, you can expect to see a lot of action in Europe this summer. Now that Africa is cleaned up, it leaves nothing but an invasion of the Italian islands to start the ball rolling. I'm curious to see how much resistance there will be in Italy proper. Be sure there will be plenty of fight, but I don't believe they will resist until the destruction of their cities become a reality. It's quite possible that when invasion does start, it will come to Europe from more than one direction. Although it would divide the Allied strength, you also see some South Pacific action. Regardless of the Russo-Jap treaties, the Japs will know that Russia will fight them when their war with Germany ends. For this reason, you'll see us retaking Kiska and Atru. Guess I better finish this and hit the hay. You're always in my hearts and prayers. Your loving son, J. Bruce.
So he has some more predictions. He loves to make his predictions.
Yeah.
This time he's not too far off, though, actually. We did begin an invasion of Italy in the summer of 1943. Probably because he's actually reading the intelligence reports, maybe. So it's not actually a prediction, it's actually him reading the intelligence. But Bruce mentions that we are retaking the islands of Kiska and Attu, which are actually part of the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, which is what I was talking about before. So although Alaska wasn't a state at the time, Dale, what can you tell us about the Japanese occupation of the Alaskan islands?
Well, from June 3rd to the 7th, 1942, Japanese forces attacked Alaska's Aleutian Islands, starting with the bombing of the American military base at Dutch Harbor and Imperial Japanese troops invading the islands of Kiska and Attu. The war had come to Alaska, and the Aleutian Islands campaign had begun. Directing an armada of 176 warships, Admiral Yamamoto hoped to use the invasion of the Aleutian Islands to lure the North American naval forces, which were crippled after the attack on Pearl Harbor, into a fight. This was the first time that the continental United States was invaded and occupied by a foreign power since the War of 1812, and was the second of only 2 invasions of the United States during World War II. Over the next few months, additional units arrived, and the occupation force eventually grew to about 5,640 military and 1,170 civilians. The Japanese built defenses and infrastructures on the islands, but facing increasing American air and naval attacks, the occupation was brutal for the few people living on the islands who were either killed, deported, or imprisoned. For example, Aleut residents of Attu were taken to Japan for the duration of the war.
Ooh.
Of the 40 captives, 16 or 40% died from disease and starvation.
Oh my goodness.
Now, the Battle of Attu, or Operation Land Crab, lasted 18 days and was one of the deadliest battles of World War II, but it remains one of the least well known.
Yeah.
So I got some highlights of the battle, because that's what ended the occupation of the Japanese on the islands. On May 11th, 12,500 U.S. soldiers landed on Attu Island. Due to the rough terrain, the Japanese used small group tactics to pin down American units with sniper fire.
Ooh.
The Army had not taken the weather into account when they supplied the soldiers with their outdoor gear, and as a result, many fell victim to exposure and suffered from frostbite by fever by the 120-mile-an-hour winds, continuous rain, and blinding fog. Over 2,100 American soldiers were taken out of action due to disease and non-battle injuries, while nearly 1,700 were killed or wounded by the Japanese. In the evening hours of May 28th, American forces who occupied the high ground controlling 3 critical hills, Fishhook, Buffalo, and Engineer. The Japanese forces were pushed to the sea, and the Americans planned to bombard them the next day. Colonel Yamasaki, the Japanese commander officer on Attu, had 2,600 able-bodied soldiers when the Americans landed. On May 28th, he only had 800 men available for combat, plus 600 men who had been wounded over the last 2 weeks of fighting. Rather than surrendering, which was considered dishonorable, Yamasaki chose to make a daring move. He and his men would counterattack the Americans at their weakest point, capture their artillery on Engineer Hill, and use it against them. Most Japanese soldiers saw the plan as a chance for honorable death, not a great victory. Japanese armed forces followed a samurai warrior code known as the Bushido Code. Bushido condemned weakness and extolled battle, bravery, loyalty, and obedience. Surrender was profoundly dishonorable, and soldiers were instructed to commit suicide rather than be captured. If a soldier chose to surrender, his dishonor spread to his family. Some wives of the prisoners of war killed themselves to escape the shame brought on them by their standards. The battle continued throughout the day, but the Japanese were not able to mount another counterattack. Colonel Yamasaki was killed later in the day as he led another wave up Engineer Hill. On May 30th, only 28 of the roughly 1,400 Japanese who had been in the valley that day before survived. The rest had been killed in battle or had committed suicide by holding hand grenades to their chests.
Oh, man.
When the Americans came across the hospital tents, they made a horrific discovery that all of the wounded had been killed by their doctors. The Americans buried 2,351 Japanese in a mass grave at Attu. The Japanese occupation ended with Allied victory in the Battle of Attu on May 30th, 1943.
Wow.
The Battle of the Two ranks as the second deadliest battle in the Pacific, falling just behind Iwo Jima. Wow. And that's everybody knows about Iwo Jima. The first combat-related exposure suffered by American forces in World War II occurred at Attu. As a result, major changes in the Army footwear, outdoor gear, tents, and food occurred.
Wow.
The Battle of Attu also caused the Japanese Imperial Army to briefly redistribute their forces in the Pacific in May 1943 to protect Japan now, because they didn't have that. U.S. forces took advantage of the depleted Imperial Army strength in the South Pacific and made significant gains in the Solomon Islands. The occupation ended with an American victory, and American forces deemed the half-completed airfield as not ideally situated. After building a new airfield, the Americans launched bomber attacks against the Japanese home island for the remainder of the war. The battlefield area in Attu was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1985. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service owns and manages Attu as part of the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge.
Wow.
So it's
Wow.
quite
What a battle.
Quite a battle.
When I researched this, I went, whoa.
I know. I didn't know all that.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. We don't talk about it.
Bushido.
Hanks and Spielberg need to get hold of that one.
Yeah.
And it was a base to attack Japan because they knew they were going to have to do it. So that was a good.
And of course, Alaska was what? Just a territory then? I mean, it wasn't a state, obviously.
Right.
Just still,
It's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Which I think is why we forget that it was an attack on the mainland of
Yeah,
the
when you
U.S.
said
'cause
that, I
it-
went, oh, okay.
or like it wasn't a U.S.
And of course,
state
the
at the time, but-
Bushido was, that's what most of them did.
Yeah.
They, one of the other little clips in there talked about the doctors gave them shots of morphine to kill them in the
wow.
hospitals.
Thank
That's how they
goodness.
put them down in the hospitals with
goodness.
morphine. So,
Wow.
yeah, war.
Yeah. Well, on a lighter note,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, not much, but you can,
but
it's a
anything
low
would be
bar
a
for
lighter
that.
note, yeah.
In Lowell at this time, so in May of 1943, the Ledger was celebrating 50 years of publication, which is nice. And so to celebrate, they reran some of their stories from their very first issue in 1893. And of course, Frank McMahon pops up from 1893. And it said Frank McMahon, Tom Murphy, George Hunter, Eustace Anderson, and C. Kellogg ran down to Grand Rapids on their wheels. The first two, so that'd be Frank, made the return trip in 2 hours and 5 minutes. So in 1893, I did some math. If Frank would have been 20 years old, so kind of a young kid, I guess. But I can't figure out what wheels he would have been on in 1893. I don't think it would have been a car, maybe a bike.
Well, 2 hours.
I don't know.
Yeah,
a
2
carriage.
hours,
But then
2
he went to
hours.
Grand Rapids in 2 hours and back.
I
No,
would, I
maybe
would
just
think
the
that's a
return
horse.
trip.
Horse.
But it said wheels.
1890.
Oh, do you
I guess you
think,
could like a
well,
carriage,
A carriage.
maybe a
Or a
carriage.
buggy. Or a cutter.
Well, yeah, because it couldn't be 2 hours on a bike. For goodness sakes, it's take me that. Well,
The
I wouldn't be able to make it.
Bikes were the big wheel things back then, weren't
Yeah,
they?
I mean, yeah, it
but
would have been
still 2
longer than 2.
hours.
It would have been
Would've
longer than 2
hours.
hours.
You would
Yeah,
have-
you're right.
You would have an awful sore backside riding that to Grand Rapids.
It's got to be a horse.
So did
I
they
mean,
just, why was this news?
1893, there was livery stables. I mean, my grandfather, great-grandfather, had the livery stables and stuff with horses and buggies. And
so
must have
on
been-
their wheels is just kind of a,
yeah.
Maybe, but maybe they talked about carriage being on their wheels.
well, I don't know.
Why? And then why is this news that they drove to Grand Rapids and back? I don't know. Like
Must
it's
have been
so
somewhat
funny.
of a race if they had
That's
the
what I was
hours.
thinking.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find any other things on it. I even looked at the ledger from 1893, and there wasn't much else to elaborate on, which is a wild thing to look at, by the way. If you go look at the
picture, there's a
1893 issues.
picture in the museum of the first car in Lowell, so I'll have to dig
Okay.
that up and see what year that was.
But yeah, it does sound like a race, kind of.
Yeah.
So anyway, I
Maybe
spent a long
somebody
time
in
trying
our
to figure
audience
this
will know.
out.
That's a
Yeah.
mystery. We
So you
need
wanna
some
just-
help on that one.
Anyone knows about 1893 Lowell news? Let us
And
know.
was 2 hours and 5 minutes a good time? We have to
I don't know.
what-
We have no idea. No
Record
clue.
time, maybe.
No clue. All right. Well, it's like I said, it's May 1943, and many of us at this table know that Bruce's birthday was May 2nd. And so we're going to read a couple of letters that he wrote right before and right after his birthday. So we're actually kind of going back to like late April, early May here. And it's his first birthday away from home because remember he joined the service like at the end of May. We are coming up on a whole year of him being gone, but
Oh, okay.
he must have been able to celebrate his birthday in 1942 at home before he left. So the first letter we're going to read is from April 29th, 1943, in his own words.
Thursday. Dear Mother and Dad, I'm sitting here munching an apple, so if this page is messed up, blame the apple. Burns' letter with the enclosed blotters of Mountain Boys came this morning. I sure get a kick out of those cartoons. On Easter, I was thinking about your Easter lily, Mother, of last year, thinking that times do change, but a person's feelings and love never change. Sunday, I'll be 28 and hardly a baby anymore, even if I am the baby of the family. Chances are I'll be en route to my next base on my birthday, but the way things look now, it won't be until next week sometime. You know, I've just decided what I want for my birthday. I want you and Dad to put on your glad rags and drive into GR. And then I want you to fund a move that hasn't anything connected with war in it. Go to the movie, stop maybe at Booth's or Lena Lou's and have a sandwich, and then come home again. You could tell Uncle Lou that you were celebrating my birthday per instructions. Will you do it? Got to get this in the mail now. All my love and prayers to keep you safe and well till I return. Your loving son, J. Bruce. Never doubt that I will be returning because I will, and as alive and ornery as I ever was.
That's a cute end to the letter. So we do have the Mountain Boys cartoons in our primary sources. So if you're interested to see what cartoons he gets a kick out of, they're there. And yes, because this was written technically before he went to Dalhart, he's talking about being en route to his next base, which we know ends up being Dalhart. But we also have our first mention of the Lena Lou. And who is Uncle Lou? This is a family member, probably not, but yeah.
Right.
Dad, Aunt Lori, can you tell us more about the Lena Lou and what that is and how it kind of connects to our family?
I know what Uncle Lou looks like because I have a picture of Dad with Uncle Lou when he bought the business from him. And I know he bought it from Lena and Lou, so I know that must have been husband and wife, I'm assuming.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Oh.
But I do have some memories of Lena Lou in my 20s, or late 20s. So, yeah, we won't go into those. But, you know.
Do you remember when Dad owned it?
No, I don't remember
See,
that.
I remember a lot about Lena Lou. That was, as a kid, growing up with the Lena Lou was great. Because, you know, it's a bar, for those who don't know.
Okay, maybe some of our listeners don't know.
And it used to be right on M21, but they rerouted M21 and took down the old bridge.
I never knew that. Rerouted M21.
Oh, yeah, it went right by, the M21
Did it
went
really?
right by Lena Lou. He was, and it did hurt business quite a
So
bit.
where did it cross the river then?
Well, the bridge was right there, right where
wow,
Lena
I
Lou
never
is.
did
Yeah,
that.
you don't remember that old bridge, huh?
Oh, no.
Yeah. And then they put the new bridge in, and Dad had to, he purchased a huge sign with a big arrow that lit up and pointed where, where to turn to go to Lena Lou.
I know stories about it, but
Yeah,
I don't know
but,
anything. Yeah.
Oh, and, every New Year's Eve we blew up balloons. That was tedious, but we could all, whenever we wanted, we'd sneak in and get a scoop of ice cream cone. He had all those big boxes of Milky Way bars and stuff. Oh, man, it was great. I remember a lot about it. He had a house out and back that he spent the night sometimes.
Oh.
And he had a dog that stayed there. Not Colonel.
Goodness.
It could have been Major. Maybe he just...
Maybe a second
He
lieutenant.
had a dog named Major?
I think he might have had a dog. I hadn't put them together because I didn't remember Colonel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably it.
But I remember a lot of stories about the Lena Lou. Oh,
I do too.
I could talk forever about that.
Wow.
Yeah, me too.
Your dad played there, right, in different
Oh, yeah,
bands because he played
there,
sax.
yeah.
And Bill Jones played there too with your dad.
And it was mixed racially on Sunday nights, which was unheard of.
No kidding.
Because it's the only place. But Dad used to say, "Well, nobody hassled me because they knew my brother was Roger, the DA. So it was no problem."
Wow.
Okay.
Oh man.
That's
Now, that's a whole other thing because I can remember Mother getting Dad giving her the cash and telling her take it home and put it in the lettuce, put it in the refrigerator, in the lettuce bin, and then Mother was nervous because there was a car that followed her home the whole way, but it was the police.
Oh.
Somebody that I thought it was somebody Dad had like arranged an escort, but hadn't told her. And she was again. She was worried about it.
Oh my goodness.
So many different things. So many different things
Well,
about Lena Lou.
okay, so clearly the Lena Lou existed in 1943 because he's telling Frank and Lotta to go there.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying Aunt Lori was owned by a husband and wife couple,
I
Lena
believe
and Lou.
Lena and Lou,
Uncle,
yep.
So Uncle Lou. I'm using, It's not really your uncle.
Dad
but-
always wanted to own a bar, so I knew that
Okay.
much. That
So
was funny.
after the war, he clearly did that. He bought it from Lena and Lou, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's some recipe that's
the chicken recipe.
the chicken recipe that's
He had to pay $500 for the chicken recipe, which, by the way, when he later sold it, the bar, the same guy who I can't think of his name, same guy who owned the Riverview, brought the Riverview chicken recipe, or brought Dad's chicken recipe out to the Riverview. So if you remember,
Well,
that,
now it's back to the Dirty Shame bar. I
no,
think
no,
it's
no,
called.
No?
the-
no
no, you're too young.
different place.
Oh, different place.
Yeah,
Okay.
the river's just the Riverview is just east of town. But anyway,
So the Lena Lou was on this side of the bridge, and then the Fox, was on the
Fox,
other side. So you had two
that was more a piano bar. but
more jazz and blues and stuff.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember going to eat at the Lena Lou, not when Grandpa owned it,
Right.
obviously, but like it still existed in the 90s. Mm-hmm. I don't know when it left Ada or when it.
Well, that's another story about why that.
Oh, okay.
We can't get into that one.
Okay. I had moved away from
we
Lowell
get
at that
Brother
point.
Mike here sometime. He could go on for a long time about that.
All right. Well, yeah, that's another episode, I guess. But yeah, so I think it's just funny that I knew that Grandpa had owned it. It's somewhere in the 60s and then 50s, 60s. But I was surprised to hear it like mentioned here. Like,
I'll get you that
anyway,
picture.
On
to go
Saturday
eat.
nights, we'd be watching Get Smart and I Dream of Jeannie, and then Dad would come home Saturday night he'd come in for just a visit. Come in, drop some stuff, and then go back and have to close up late at night. And then he would spend the night at the house in the back, and we'd see him the next
Oh,
morning.
really? Yeah.
That happened a lot. So
Wow. Well,
a lot of good memories.
We're going to finish today with a letter that Bruce wrote actually on his 28th birthday, May 2nd, 1943. So, in his own words.
Sunday. Dear Mother and Dad, sure, I expected to spend my birthday en route to some new base, and yet today dawned bright and hot with your youngest still in Blythe. Or should it be spelled Blight? I finished flying. In fact, all B-17 flying ceased 3 days ago, and so I'm just loafing till my transfer comes along. There's no telling for sure when I'll get my orders, but I believe it'll be around the 5th. Well, 'tis been 28 years since they were telling you, why, it's another boy. And looking back on my 20 years of life, I realize how lucky I've been to have such a swell home to grow up in. No matter what the future may bring, it can't take away all the happy memories I have. Not that there won't be future happy days for me. I'm continually looking forward to spending years with you, but with my doing the giving and you the receiving for a change. Those days aren't far off, believe me. Before the end of the summer, I hope to get home. It'll probably only be for 2 days, but that's about the best leave I can get in here. I've tried every way I know to get a chance to take leave, but so far I've just been balked at every attempt. There isn't any news, so I guess I'll just finish this and do my packing. It's quite an accomplishment to get everything in 2 bags, but I manage. All my love and prayers, your loving son, J. Bruce.
Yeah, we're getting closer. He will get to go home very soon. Very soon. So happy birthday, Bruce. Do you remember celebrating Bruce's birthday growing up or other birthdays?
Well, yes.
Tell us about Grandpa's 75th
75th, okay.
birthday.
Well, Mitch's birthday's right around there too. So.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Well, Dad had this, and it was Dad, because he would go out and he would find a branch, and he would peel it back. And now this is when we were older, past the toy stage. So on our birthday, he would give us, he would tape dollar bills to a branch, as many dollar bills as we were old. And this was a tradition. So on your 18th birthday, you got 18, and when you turned 21, you knew there'd be $21 for you someday. So he did this for a lot of years, and then on his 75th birthday, we surprised him. We went out and got a tree branch, pretty big around, and we taped $75 to it.
That's cool.
It just kills me to think that I'm almost closing in on that. It's just scary. But we've kept up the tradition. Lori's done it.
Yeah.
My wife Jody does it every year for my grandson Max. So
He got the little
$16 this
He
year.
would get the little drill out, and he would drill a piece of, like a little wooden stand, so that he
Yes,
could
so it would stand up. Oh,
and
yeah, he
put
made
the
a little
branch in
production
it so that it would stand up.
Yeah. Thank
Aw.
you for adding that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
stand up.
really cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember the 75th birthday celebration, which, you mentioning it sort of unlocked this memory deep in my brain. But
So
I do
you'd
remember.
have been 9. So
Yeah. I remember $75 bills on a tree.
Yeah.
Yes, I do remember this now in the kitchen.
And then we did that for you guys sometimes, right?
Yeah. When I turned 21, I had a tree branch full of ones.
Just a
And a
wonderful
stone,
thing.
and a stone, and a tree branch and a stone.
I'll look for the
Maybe a bag
picture.
of dirt.
I'll look for the picture. For
Yeah,
the,
see if we can get a picture of the money tree.
Yeah.
As a
Dad's
family
75th.
tradition.
Yeah.
They Mom and Dad really spent a lot of time and effort on birthdays. They
Yeah,
really,
we did.
and Christmas and Easter.
Yeah.
But yeah, they celebrated all the holidays.
How lucky we were to grow up in such a swell home like you.
Aw.
Well, I got off the kindergarten bus one year, and I was coming up our big long drive, and they had hidden up in the trees, up in the pine trees. They'd climbed up in the pine trees and were shooting bow and arrows at us. And I know it's just
Grandpa and Grandma were?
well, no, my brothers and sisters.
Brothers and
Oh, I was going to say, what? I can't picture Grandma Maggie climbing a tree.
A lot of
Well,
fun.
alive,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Seems like you guys had a fun time.
We did.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to Letters Home. We hope you continue to listen as we go through Bruce's story. You can listen to Letters Home on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Lowell Historical Museum website and YouTube channel. New episodes drop every Thursday. The Lowell Historical Museum has digitized versions of Bruce's letters so you can read them in full, along with primary sources for most of the people, places, and events we've talked about here today, plus more. You can also follow the Lowell Historical Museum on Facebook and the Letters Home podcast on Instagram at Letters Home Lowell. Thank you to Roger McNaughton for our podcast music and to WRWW 92.3 FM for letting us record in their studio at Lowell High School every week. Tune in or stream WRWW at lowellradio.org. See you next time.